March 1957. The corner of Commerce and Flores Street in San Antonio, Texas. A man in a canvas work shirt and a tan Stetson walked into a shop that most people in that part of the city had stopped noticing years before, and he picked up a whip from the rack by the door. What he read on the handle that afternoon would keep a 72-year-old man in his trade for 11 more years and put his son back in a city he had given up on, and leave something in a glass case in a tack shop on the north side of San Antonio that is still there today. Dario Vela had been braiding leather in that same building since 1931. He was not expecting anyone that afternoon. He was not expecting much of anything. Here is the story. The shop sat on the ground floor of a narrow 2-story building on Commerce Street, 6 blocks from the river, in the part of San Antonio that was not yet renovated and not yet abandoned, but was passing quietly between the two. It smelled of tallow and raw hide and the cedar oil Dario used on the finished work, and there was a radio on a shelf behind the counter that played a Mexican station out of Laredo, and had played it for so long that the silence when it was off felt wrong. Whips hung on dowel pegs along the right-hand wall. On a work table behind the counter lay a half-braided quirt, a coil of latigo, and a coffee cup that had been there since morning. Dario Vela was 62 years old and had worked leather in that building for 26 years. He had learned the craft from his father, who had learned it in Jalisco and brought it north in 1908, and the particular style of the Vela braid, a 16-strand overlay with a tighter taper than most American makers used, was not something you found in a catalog or a trade school. It existed in the hands of 2 people in the world, and one of them was Dario, and the other was his son Marco, who had left San Antonio for Houston in 1953 when the orders dried up enough that the shop could not pay 2 men. He had stayed. He made whips for the rodeo circuit, for ranchers in the hill country, for film productions that sent orders by mail with detailed specifications. Those orders had kept the lights on in the lean years. The last one had come in the fall of 1955. There had not been another. His wife, Elena, had died in January of 1954, 3 weeks after a diagnosis she had kept from Dario until Christmas, because she had not wanted to ruin Christmas. He had come back to the shop on a Monday and made a quirt from start to finish without stopping, because that was the only thing he knew to do with his hands that morning. Porfirio Serna had sold the building in November of 1956 to a development company out of Austin. A letter came in February, signed by a man named Curtis Hale, Regional Director of Property Operations, informing Dario his lease would not be renewed at its current rate. The new rate, effective May 1st, was $74 a month. The current rate was $22. Dario had done the arithmetic from several directions. It was the same from every direction. He had not told Marco. He had not called a lawyer. He came in every morning at 7 and left at 6, and did what work there was to do. It was a Thursday afternoon in March when the door opened, and a man came in. He was a large man, bigger than the door seemed to expect. He wore a canvas jacket over a dark work shirt, and a tan Stetson that had been in weather. He stopped just inside the door and looked at the whips on the wall the way a man looks at something he has an opinion about. Not casually, not like a tourist, but with the eyes of someone who has used this kind of thing and knows what he is looking at. He took down a bullwhip from the 3rd peg. It was a 6-foot fall, 12 plat, with a shot-loaded handle that Dario had wrapped in a dark burgundy kangaroo hide and finished with a 4-strand Turk's head knot at the heel. One of the best things Dario had made in the past year. He held it the way you hold a whip when you mean to assess it rather than admire it. By the handle, with the fall hanging loose, feeling the weight and the balance and the taper. He turned the handle over in his hand and read the small stamp there. The letters were pressed into the heel of the kangaroo hide in a line, Di Vella, San Antonio. He looked up. Dario was standing at the work table watching him. "Yours," the man said. It was not a question. 26 years, Dario said. The man looked at the handle once more. He hung the whip back on the peg carefully, the way a man returns something he respects to the place it belongs. He walked to the counter. He looked at the half-braided quirt on the work table. He looked at the coil of latigo and the dowel rack and the radio behind the counter. "You got a problem," he said. Dario told him about the letter, about Curtis Hale and the $74 and the May 1st date. He told it the way he had told no one because he had not told anyone, in plain, measured language, with the particular flatness of a man who has had several weeks to arrive at the facts and has arrived at them and does not expect them to change. The man listened. He did not nod or make sounds while Dario talked. He waited until Dario was done. "What do you need to keep it open?" he said. Dario told him he needed the rate to stay where it was. He needed either that or enough orders on the books to cover the gap. The craft orders were not there. The film orders had been the difference, and the film orders had stopped. The man looked at the whip rack. "How many can you fill in 30 days? Dario said he could fill 6 bullwhips and 4 quirts in 30 days if the leather was already on hand. "I'll take 6 bullwhips," the man said. 6-foot fall, same build as the one on the peg. I need a name stamped on each handle. He said the name. Dario looked at him. The man said he was on a production down near Brackettville that needed whips for a scene they were reshooting. And the prop master had been sourcing from a supplier in California whose work he was not happy with. And he had come into San Antonio looking for a maker and had walked past this door 3 times before he came in. And now that he was in, he could see they had been wasting time in California. Dario said the name stamped on the handles would cost extra. "I know it," the man said. Dario looked at the wall. He was quiet for a moment. "That covers 1 month," he said. "Maybe 6 weeks." "Then we'll talk about the next 6 weeks when we get there," the man said. "You make the whips. I'll handle the rest." If you've ever watched a trade die on paper, numbers that don't care what a man built or what it cost him, drop a comment. Drop your state. I want to know how far this one reaches. He went to the door and came back. He was still a moment. Something had shifted. He looked at the whip rack, then back at Dario. "You still in contact with the production people you dealt with before?" he said. Dario said he had names and addresses from the last several years. Orders from 3 different studios, 2 television productions, a circus out of Florida that had come back 3 times. "Write them down," the man said. "All of them." He took the list Dario wrote and put it in his jacket pocket. He said he would be in touch with the prop departments himself, and that Dario would likely hear something within the month. He said it the way a man says something he has already worked out, rather than something he intends to try. "One other thing," he said. He looked at the whip on the 3rd peg. "The rate," he said. "Hale, who does he report to?" Dario had the letter. He found the letterhead. There was an address in Austin and a corporate name, and in small print at the bottom, the name of a parent company registered in Dallas. The man looked at it for a moment. He handed the letter back. "I know someone who knows someone in Dallas," he said. "I'm not promising anything, but that rate may not hold." He put his hat on. Dario's hand was on the work table. He was not a man given to speeches, and he did not give one. He said, "You came in for a whip." "I came in for 6, the man said. "Have them ready in 3 weeks. I'll send someone to pick them up." He went out. Dario stood at the work table in the quiet of the shop for a long time. The radio played. The half-braided quirt lay where it had been all morning. He picked it up and turned it in his hands, and then set it down again. Then he picked it up once more and went to work. The 6 bullwhips were ready in 19 days. A production assistant in a rented Ford came by on a Tuesday morning and loaded them into the back seat in a canvas bag and left an envelope on the counter. Inside was a check for the whips and, folded separately, a handwritten list of 3 names and telephone numbers, 2 prop masters at studios in Burbank, 1 in New York, with a note that said only, "They're expecting your call." Dario called the first number that afternoon. He had an order before the week was out. He called the second number the following Monday. A television western in production in Arizona needed 8 snake whips for a fight sequence with specific requirements: weighted handles, particular fall lengths, a muted finish that would read well in black and white. The specifications were the kind Dario had been filling for 20 years. He quoted a price and a lead time, and the prop master said that would be fine, and how soon could he start? In April of 1957, 6 weeks after the man in the Stetson had walked out of the Commerce Street shop, Dario received a letter from the development company in Austin. It was signed by Curtis Hale, Regional Director of Property Operations, and it informed him that upon review, his lease rate had been set in error, and the correct rate for his space, effective immediately, was $28 a month. The letter gave no reason for the revision and offered no explanation of what had changed between February and April. Dario read it. He read it again. He set it on the work table next to the coffee cup and went back to the snake whips for Arizona. Dario Vella worked the Commerce Street shop until 1968. 11 years after the afternoon the door opened, and a man read the stamp on a handle and asked a question. By 1962, the production orders had become regular, not large, not certain, but consistent enough that the gap Dario had been crossing on savings was closed for good. He brought Marco back from Houston in 1963. Marco had spent a decade doing upholstery work in a shop off Navigation Boulevard, and had gotten good at it in the way you get good at something when it is what you do, but not what you know. He came back to San Antonio in the fall of 1963 and was on the work table beside his father by November. He had to relearn the 16-strand overlay. The taper took him 4 months to get back. By spring of 1964 it was there, in his hands, as if the decade in Houston had only interrupted it rather than taken it. Dario died in February of 1968, at 72 years old, in the back room of the shop on a Tuesday morning, which was where and when he would have wanted to go. Marco closed for a week and opened again the following Monday. Marco ran the shop until 1989. He moved it in 1971 when the Commerce Street building was finally sold to a developer who meant it this time, to a space on the north side of San Antonio near the rodeo grounds, where the customer base was closer, and the light in the mornings came in right. He taught his own daughter, Lena, at the bench starting in 1977, when she was 15 and interested in the way children are interested in things they have watched since they were small. Lena Vella still makes whips. The Vella braid, 16-strand overlay, tighter taper, is in her hands the way it was in Dario's. She does not advertise. She has a waiting list. In 1989, when Marco retired and handed Lena the keys, he found the 6 bullwhips in a cedar chest in the back of the shop, the ones with the name stamped into the heel. He had kept them when the production assistant returned them. 1 had been damaged in filming, and the other 5 had come back with a note that they were surplus to the production's needs. No return address required. One of them is in a glass case near the front of Lena's shop. The handle is dark burgundy kangaroo hide with a 4-strand Turk's head at the heel, and the name is still legible in the stamp, pressed clean into the leather the way Dario pressed everything, for the long run, not the short one. The morning light comes through the east window and crosses the case for about an hour before it climbs the wall and goes. And in that hour, the color in the handle comes up the way color does in good leather when the light is on it. And then the light moves on, and the whip stays in its case, and the name holds. John Wayne never told anyone. Not the prop master at the Bracketville production. Not his director. Not in any letter anyone ever found or any interview he gave in the years that followed. He came back to set with the receipt for the whips and said he had found a maker in San Antonio who could solve the problem they were having with the California supplier. And that was the full account he gave. There is a kind of man who sees what a room has decided not to see. A man sitting at a work table in a shop with a shrinking lease and a half-braided quirt, and a radio playing Laredo and nobody coming through the door. Most people walk past that door. They do not walk in. They do not pick up the whip and read the stamp and ask how long. Some things don't announce themselves. A name pressed into leather. 26 years of a man's hands in a single mark. The kind of man who reads it and understands what it means and stays is not a common kind. That is the whole of it. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more stories like this one, and every one of them deserves to be told. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.